Okay, thank you, Dana, and thank you everyone else who's on the line who's joined out this webcast. Thank you for putting aside this hour. The webcast today is on our report for Poland specifically, and the title is obviously Who Will Pay for the New Power Plants, and this is the theme around today's PowerPoint slides. I hope you can hear me clearly. If you can't, please send out a message on the notice board and we will pick that up. Okay, so the questions you can send throughout the presentation so that we will answer the questions near the end. Okay. So the agenda for today is we'll briefly introduce what ABB energy market fuel and electricity price forecast is, and what are the different parts that make those forecasts, including the model. And then one of my colleagues, Ankur Garg, who's an expert on energy market analysis and advisory, will take you through the rest of the slides. And a Q&A session will follow right at the end. Okay. So we'll jump straight into it. Just a few slides up front to tell you a little bit about ourselves. We're part of ABB Energy Market Advisory Services team, and this is part of the wider energy portfolio management group within ABB. So now focusing on energy markets, on the top there you see a band which covers a broad range of things, and below that a number of areas. So in terms of energy market reports and data services, we have what we call the reference case on the right-hand side. Actually, I'll switch the slide because it'll make it clearer to you. So in the red box there, we have, in terms of energy market analysis, we have our long-term 25-year electricity market and fuel outlooks. These are 25-year hourly forecasts of, of course, the power prices across the various countries in Europe, as well as fuel price forecasts for the different fuels. And we call this the reference case because this often forms the base case for further analysis and scenario analysis in relation to energy markets. So that is the output of our product. One of our other products, which is the energy market analysis and simulation software, which is highlighted in the green box there, is the simulation engine that we use to produce the outputs, and the outputs form the reference case. Now, the other core element of this analysis is actually our simulation data that we use, and this simulation data is broken up into zonal data. So a country is a zone in our model, but we can actually model it at a finer resolution than that, where each country is broken down into regions. And our North American colleagues also have what we call nodal simulation data, because the markets in North America are locational marginal pricing based, so fully nodal. So the combination of these three things, give us the advantage of being able to have basically a very rich plant database, power plants across Europe, have all the operational characteristics of these plants, new build plans, etc., fuel price forecasts, feed it into our comprehensive energy market analysis model, and then produce fairly comprehensive results, which we then pull together in a form of a report, as well as PowerPoints and Excel sheets with lots of data and analysis. Okay, so in terms specifically energy market advisory services and products, effectively we're a team of experts, and we cover a broad range of services, which is including energy market forecasting and economic analysis, generation plant analysis, evaluations, due diligence process, as well as now we're expanding into doing transmission system studies, as well as investment strategy development. So these reference case reports that the results of which my colleague Ankur will describe later, are basically by country, but we also make available general analysis, which is by region of Europe. So off the shelf, these reports are available, as well as the underlying simulation data, and of course the simulation model is available as well. And we have a webcast series, and this is the first one of 4 coming up in the following 4 weeks. Okay, so what is the reference case? It is based on energy market fundamentals, the supply and demand curve, so to say, in terms of economic theory. It is an independent point of view, so we have our own team, we collect our own data publicly available, and we have our own models. We're not influenced by government, we're completely independent. We don't trade on the markets. So our views are independent, and that forms a good basis for some of our clients who take our outputs as an independent point of view to compare what they do internally within the teams. These reports are available twice a year, in which we refresh the underlying data sets, which is quite a lot of work, but it's worthwhile. Our clients typically span generation utilities, energy companies, retailers, investors, as well as equipment manufacturers or large consumers. Yeah, so effectively, the core of each forecast is the hourly level 25-year forecast, and this can be broken down to different things, but essentially it is power market price forecast, fuel price forecast with a very detailed report on how these forecasts are formed, and of course, for the different markets, emission price forecast as well as emissions. There are about 100 different outputs we can produce out of this model. I won't go through all of them at this stage, but essentially the coverage here is depicted by this map. The points in blue are the countries we currently have these reports for, including ISEM, so we are already doing reports for the Irish market, looking into what it will be with the new regulations and rules when it comes into force. We also cover Greece and Turkey on the bottom right-hand side. You can see that Turkey is missing for some reason in this PowerPoint. Apologies for that, but we do cover reference case reports for Turkey as well. Everything in red we can produce on request. So this is for Europe, and we cover most of Europe. I also want to just quickly glimpse over North America. So we cover all of North America. About 5 different regions for which we produce reference cases, and of course do similar webcasts for each of these regions. Okay, in terms of delivery, so these reference cases are obviously available in the form of reports and Excel files. We also have the option of providing the input data set and the results in form of pure data outputs, CSVs, etc., as our clients request. And often a lot of these, what we call reference case outputs, form the input to our clients for doing further flexible scenarios. And sometimes our clients do these scenarios themselves. In other cases, we do it for them based on request. Okay, and the final slide in my part here is just that the underlying simulation model is actually very detailed. It accounts for hourly chronological constraints across the 25 years that we simulate for. It accounts for the interconnector flows, of course fuel prices as input, so it's a massive influencer of the output. Used by hundreds of companies across the world for doing energy market simulation, power price forecasts, in analyzing investments in the performance and profitability of power plants, and the need for flexible power plant technology in the future, given the increasing amounts of renewables in the different markets. And it's underlying, it's all based on a robust client-server system, so we can actually run a lot of scenarios very quickly. Okay, with that, thank you for your time. I'd just like to pass this now to my colleague Ankur Garg, who will take you through the remainder of the presentation, which is focused on Poland.
Thank you, Kavi. Thank you, Dana. Good afternoon to all the listeners. My name is Ankur. I'll take you through for the next part of the presentation. Thanks, Kavi, for giving a good and brief introduction about ABB, about our group advisory services, about the energy and fuel market outlook reports that we generate, and also about our software market analytics, some introduction. These next slides, I'll be taking around 30-35 minutes, going through some of the inputs, some of the outputs, some scenarios, some assumptions of our latest market outlook report, which we accomplished towards end of September. And all our clients and subscribers got it towards the finished report towards October. And the next one, we do it, as Kavi told, in semi-annual cycle, and the next one is due around March next year. So, next slide. So, since we work with fundamental model, this is a very important, any fundamental change is quite important to modeling in itself, whether it be fundamental one-off event like Fukushima and resulting change in the fundamentals here in Europe, for example, a nuclear shutdown in Germany, or whether it be a gas price conflict between Russia and Ukraine, or simply oil price spike through Arab Spring. Some of these fundamental changes are temporary, some of them really continue and intensify. And one of the biggest fundamental change that we are witnessing, and it's even intensifying, is the 2020 European Union targets. And they not only affect Poland, but across almost all the markets within Europe. So I've listed these three targets. The first one, renewable targets. The EU goal is 20% share in primary energy by 2020, whereby Poland's goal is slightly relaxed, around 15% of the total energy share. We have seen only modest growth in renewables generation in Poland, and in a very optimistic best case scenario, it will only be meeting its NREAP obligations. Going forward, if there were to be really aggressive renewable build, we might see some internal congestions, some transmission issues, and locational pricing arising through it. This issue is already being talked about in some parts of Europe, for example, Germany. We have this issue already in Italy, where South Italy and North Italy have different prices because of these internal conditions. The second target, the efficiency target, has not affected Poland yet because simply there is no national plan for energy efficiency target in Poland yet. Moreover, it's a EU-level target. However, going forward, we do see that there could be some limits to the demand growth within Poland. And you'll see when I'll show you some demand forecast how it's already affecting some Western European countries like Germany and France and Italy. Now, the challenging target for Poland at the moment is the CO2 target, the CO2 reduction target. And here as well, Poland has got a lot of subsidies to modernize its coal fleet, at least to meet the 40% CO2 targets, cut targets by 2030. And as we go forward, and as we are witnessing the last couple of years in Poland, there is already a change in generation structure going on, and it will definitely have a big impact on the future plant mix as well. In the next couple of slides, I'll take you through some of the recent developments in Polish market, what we are seeing in the recent history, in the recent past, is a good demand growth in Poland. Also on the chart, on the graph, you'll see that the price levels in 2013 have been quite consistent, around 40 euros per megawatt hour, but certainly in 2014 we see the effects of coal plants being upgraded, maintenance being done, and also mothballing of few coal units, which are having impact on prices. And as the coal outages increased during winter period, we saw a jump in peak prices. Come 2015, we see a jump again in peak prices, and that resulted in shortfall of capacity during the heat wave period. We all know really Indian summer during July and August this year in Europe. Another thing which I've spoken is that the emission targets are relaxed for Poland, and it has time until July 2020 for stricter enforcement of stricter emission rules. One slide ahead. We have also seen that the remit regulation is already in force, and we have been able to get hold of some of the data published by some bigger utilities in Poland. So we see in general market participants compliant to it. The Polish system operator PAC organized for 4.5 gigawatts of cold reserve contracts. These contracts were meant to phase out in 2017 with an option of extension until 2019, and it just meant to prevent, instead of closing the coal power plants or power plants in general, which were supposed to be mothballed or are not economic anymore, just to have them in reserve to meet the system requirements. We've also seen in 2014, for example, that there were some flow disruptions between Poland and Germany, and we know that they are now phase shifters to avoid the circular flows from Germany to Poland and back to different various countries during the high wind infeed time periods. And a very important topic, also the title of our talk today, who is going to pay for the new power plants. And as a result of that, capacity markets are being discussed in Poland. There is no regulation or law or any red path yet, and the talks are either the capacity market mechanism to be in line with UK or in line with Germany, or a combination of both. We have to simply wait and see how it develops. When we've talked about some recent events, of course, demand when we make forecast is a very big, has a very big impact on prices as well. Going forward, what the absolute level of demand in peak hours and in general in terms of energy is. And what we have seen lately, at least here I have a graph from 2009 to 14, that Poland has been really a bright spot compared to many other Western European countries. You see on the extreme right side only Austria just above zero level annual average growth, and Poland a bit more than 0.5%, which for the matter of fact is more dragged down by the demand destruction in 2009. But if you omit that year, then the average growth has been much higher than just 0.5%. And it has been a result of that Poland really recovered early from 2008 and 9 financial recession. It was always having a stronger GDP and manufacturing growth, and really no impact of energy efficiency measures which led to any kind of demand destruction in Poland. So it was quite interesting growth. Here, Sweden is a star here because the data was incomplete, so just don't wonder if it's just too big of an average of Sweden. I think it's only data of 2014 and 15 that we could get hold of. So now I'll take through some of the inputs which goes into building our forecast for this energy and fuel market report. And what we have seen while we are going through Poland and studying about it was really of this retirements topic, and then of course what's the new build. These are really the market issues that are capturing most of the energies. So what's going to retire? And as we see on the graph, there is a cumulative capacity requirement graph, and we see up till 2020, we expect around 10 gigawatts of capacity to retire, mostly in the form of hard coal and lignite. if you just imagine the size of the Polish market, the installed capacity of around 38 gigawatts, and if you are talking 10 gigawatts of retirements, that's almost slightly more than 25% of its total installed capacity only between 2015 and 20, which is retiring. So this makes the market quite interesting, also from fundamentals viewpoint, that we'll see in the next few slides. And main reason for this retirements are, of course, the stricter emission requirements, which are forcing coal power plants either to comply or to close. The right graph is just an extension of the previous graph, and you could see the figure around 2020, 10 gigawatt of retirements. We just thought to show you on a graph how the total cumulative requirements look like over the complete study period, and you'll see that we are having a lot of hard coal retirements. Lignite will pick up, and also towards the end of the study period, some gas power plants. And these jumps that you see are first in 2020. It's due to the stricter emission requirements, the compliance to those requirements. And then again in 2030s and 31, there are few blocks of hard coal and lignite being retired. And just as a reference, I've plotted here from our system also the age of the Polish fleet. You'll see a lot of plants being online in 70s and 80s, or installation date in 70s and 80s, which will be retiring after 2020s as well. And since then, really a kind of curfew, not really much has been coming up online. Okay, this was what is going to retire. And now, really, the other side of the equation, if the capacity is going to retire, then something will need to replace it. Here I have a graph first of the cumulative unit additions. Here you see from 2015 to 22. The below graph is just an extension for the complete study period until 2040. And the question really arises that we are retiring, or we will see in Polish market a lot of hard coal and lignite being retired, but what on the other side of the equation, what's going to be built? And of course we have a basis to show you what is coming online, why it is coming online, and when exactly it is coming online, and we'll talk about that basis in the next few slides. What is interesting is that here you see that coal and lignite capacity is increasingly replaced by first renewables, then towards the end of the study some increase in gas capacity as well, and of course the nukes, which will be elementary if we are replacing the base load coal and lignite. And nuke is something that we assume it will enter the Polish market around 2030s. However, what we know from the public sources is that the government estimate is around 2027. We see that in 2030 there's a lot of capacity which will naturally retire, as we have seen in earlier slide, and we see that latest by then we'll need the nuclear power plants to keep the security margin. And what are already considered are the new capacity, which is already under construction, and we expect it around 6 gigawatt of new capacity, and there is another 1.5 gigawatt which is planned to be operational in the next few years. We have seen the recent demand history. When we make a forecast, it's very important what our demand forecasts are for the next years and the complete forecast horizon period. And I've here plotted from our energy market outlook of different countries all the demand forecast. And you'll see that Poland is one of the countries with the most promising outlook. Even if we are talking about just 1.2% of annual average growth, it's still one of the highest in Europe. On the other side of the equation, really the negative demand growth, we see Italy and Germany. Germany is heavily influenced by energy efficiency measures, loss of industrial load to the Eastern European countries or to Asian countries mainly, and also electric cars, vehicles towards the end of the study period may help to increase, but we still don't know what scale of that increase would be. Yes, there are just other countries like Spain and Portugal competing on top with Poland, but it's more due to the excessive demand destruction in these countries during this recession period that they are so positive in the outlook. Next slide. So reserve margins. Yes, this slide is very important since it is our basis for the new build capacity, and really in the type of the new build and the timing of it when it's supposed to come in the market. And here I've plotted three lines on the graph. One, you'll see the blue one with generic capacity. So the capacity which we don't know what type of capacity it is, we have to estimate, but we know that it should come just to keep the system margins or the reserve margins stable. And this leads to us to a question: what are actually reserve margins? And reserve margin is a very simple calculation. It's the percentage of the available capacity at the time of the peak load and the subtraction of peak load itself. So for example, in any hour in December, the peak load is 24 gigawatt, for example, and the total available capacity is 34 gigawatt. So the ratio of that minus 1 would be the reserve margins, and I think it should be around, for example, in this case, 40%. Interesting is the red line. It, of course, overshadows blue line until certain point where we do add some generic units, and after that, the red line is simply what would happen to the system if there were no new builds, generic new builds. And we'll see towards the end of the study, we will be 40% lower capacity than the peak load in Polish market. The blue line, we try to keep minimum reserve margins of around 15%. When we see them falling, we add a new generic power plant. We'll come to it in a few minutes. And then there is a yellow line, which is quite interesting because you may imagine that this red and blue line are, for the start, quite high reserve margins in Polish market. And we were ourselves a bit astonished, and then we came to our thought that this 4.5 gigawatt of coal reserve was going into the calculation of reserve margins, and if we take them out, then we come in today's real world around 15% of reserve margin in Poland. Yeah, that's quite important to know. This slide is basically, I'll not be showing you any of our, unfortunately, fuel forecast due to confidentiality and also CO2 forecast, but to let you know that we do have a dedicated fuel analysis team in our group, and they work with fundamental coal and gas models globally. What we get in terms of our energy market outlook from the input side is the country level monthly gas price forecast, so really tip burner prices, including all the transportation charges country by country. We also get a country level yearly hard coal and lignite price forecast, and then there is it's not so relevant for the European energy market, electricity market, but global oil, so both Brent and North Sea, and also gas oil and fuel oil monthly price forecast. So in some cases, gas oil and fuel oil are relevant for our forecast for the peakers, but otherwise not so much the oil itself. We also have a yearly CO2 forecast, which goes into inputs, and of course, for the UK market, we forecast carbon support price next to the normal CO2 forecast. And you get also a commentary to the fundamental fuel analysis in terms of all the graphs and numbers and its outlook for the next 25 years as a part of our outlook report. Few slides on our database here just to show you that we have Poland in our database in a quite comprehensive way. So we have around 274 thermal entities. That's only thermal apart from the hydro and pump storages. And if I were to open just one of the power plant like Adamov 1, you'll see on the left side different scenarios. Kavi mentioned earlier a little bit about scenario capability of our software, and also to each power plant then comprehensive modeling in terms of variables. And here are the list of variables that we can choose and define. We have up to 250 variables available for our discussion. On the next slide, be a bit clear. Just to show you that we do capture the data details, so all the variables related to thermal power plants like installation and retirement dates, whether it be min or max cap, which is quite essential anyway, the efficiency points, ownership and location of a power plant, with what fuel it's attached to, what's the fuel price to that fuel, if it's using some different start fuel, and if yes, then what's the start fuel quantity? What is the unit type, if it's a district heating or a CC or steam turbine? If that plant is contributing to ancillary services and how much? Of course, the VOM, variable operating and maintenance, and fixed operational and maintenance cost, maintenance rates, which is Monte Carlo, outages, ramp rates, run-up rates, repair time, minimum uptime, and many other variables. Basically, the list can be long. And on the right side, there's just a screenshot to show you that we do have a real detail of at multiple year maintenances at unit level, whether we find it publicly or on remit data, which is very important for Polish forecast because of all the coal-related, emission-related issues the market is facing at the moment. So in the next part, I'll go through some of the outputs and scenarios that we calculate, just to give you a view, an idea of what kind of outputs we deal with. To begin with, we consider different bidding scenarios, and it's just so many years back we didn't used to have these scenarios because energy markets were still, let's say, sufficient. But lately we have realized that the energy market itself do not produce any new entry points, any hope of new entrants, and therefore we consider three different bidding scenarios. We named them as scenario A, B, and C, where scenario A in really short term is cost-based run. So the units bid at their short run incremental cost of generation. There are no bets to them. We also calculate then a scenario B, in which we allow the units to bid their no load and start cost. So instead of incremental cost of generation, average cost of generation for the cycling units, and also bids to recover their start cost. And scenario C is basically a starting point. We take starting point scenario B, and then we, in addition to that, try to recover some fixed operating costs at the time of higher residual demand. And for this scenario C, we are only running the simulation from 2020 onwards, because market is not allowing to do that before. This slide is to show you the generic new build. This is something the capacity which we, if you remember the reserve margin slide where we said this is the reserve margin is the basis of what type of entrants will enter the market and when. And this is the generic entry. So these are the power plants that enter just to keep the system stable, the reserve margin stable when there is loss of capacity. And we'll see that the system is quite sustainable, at least with very few generic new entrants up until middle of the next decade. And then we'll see that there are some generic coal power plants coming online. You'll see nuclear being introduced from 2030 onwards in different blocks. There is some lignite power plants coming online. Very little gas, but still there are some CCGTs which will be required towards the end of the study period, mostly towards the end. And what this graph shows you is also that what technologies we are introducing in Poland, and these technologies may vary from country to country depending on the local regulation and also the policy of the government. So back to our topic, who is going to pay for the new power plants? And here in this slide, I try to answer that in any case, support is needed. We need someone to pay them. And let's see what this graph says. It's a bit complicated, but it's very interesting. So you have seen that we do assume some new entry as gas power plants. They are either open cycle gas turbines or combined cycle gas turbines with very high efficiencies. And they will not only be needed because the reserve margins are falling and the system needs to be stable, but we also think that going forward, some flexibility in the system will be needed. And what we are seeing here is on the axis, the revenues in euros per kilowatt per year. These red dots are the target revenues, which are kind of taken over from the Irish market. We set the target revenue around 115 euros per kilowatt per year, and we assume that a new power plant should, at least the CCGT one, should target that in order to be profitable and recover its fixed cost as well. And these are very, very efficient CCGTs, so 63% efficiency, which is introduced in 2032. And you'll see that it's only able to recover 40 euros per kilowatt per year, leaving a huge gap of around 75 euros. And going forward, one would expect the price increase, but the revenues are not really increasing. I could have shown in the next slide load factor as well. I just thought to mention it here that the load factors are also not that high. They're only 40% to start with in 2032, and by 2040 they are even falling to around 20%. So yeah, it's basically the additional money would be needed to pay the fixed and financing cost, not only the short-term marginal cost. And this gap we really think would be covered if there's not enough signals from the energy market by the capacity market. So some form of compensation needs to be there. One last thing to this graph is also that this graph has been made up by the prices coming out from scenario C. So we have already considered relatively higher beds compared to our other two scenarios, which are scenario A, only cost-based runs, and scenario B, which are cost-based runs plus no load and start cost. And this scenario C is something where the plants are already bidding up to recover some of their fixed cost. Still leaves gap. And as we also discussed earlier, the capacity markets are being discussed. Some form of revenue needs to be there to give the proper signals in the market for the missing capacity. And especially for Poland at this moment, it's quite decisive for the planning of the next 15-20 years, what needs to be built to keep the system stable. This is really an irony. So in the last slide, we have seen that load factors are low. The power plants, the gas power plants, are not making much money, but still they are important. And this graph shows you the fuel setting, the margin prices, the margin in Poland in the peak hours of the time. So these are only peak hours, they are not the base, they are not the off-peak, only peak hours. And you'll see that the gas is really setting up prices in the peak hours going forward, especially starting from 2030. If you remember, there will be a lot of capacity which will go offline out of the market, hard coal and lignite, and soon we'll get latest prices set by the gas. A consequence of that could be that despite of low load factors, gas will set the market price, which will give them more market power to have higher bids. This is something which we have not tested, but definitely this is something that can push the market prices much more higher than what we forecast, and it can also increase the volatility of the prices and of the system as well. So I think this is quite interesting scenario. Apart from our standard scenarios, the scenario A, B, C, which are part of the reports, we also do some additional scenarios which are either influenced by the recent market happenings or simply some new interconnection coming online in the future, and we want to forecast these scenario prices. And here what we have seen in Poland is during 2014, it was our year of calibration as well. There were some irregularities between the flows of the flows between Germany and Poland. And it's very difficult to estimate what will be going forward in terms of flow. If we look at the publicly available data, there's no really individual border flow available with Poland. It's always with Poland, Slovakia, and Czech Republic as a one unit. So we said, okay, let's fix the 2014 flows and just make a forecast. And then as a scenario, another scenario, what we said was let the model itself optimize the flows between Germany and Poland. And we have an interesting scenario running from that, and that's when the flows are fixed. So when they are really must run and not setting the prices. We see that Poland is treated as an island and its prices are quite high, or at least higher than the optimized flow scenario. And when we let the model determine the flow between Germany and Poland itself, we see that the prices in Poland drop. And fair enough, they drop because the cheaper generation is available in the neighboring countries, in Germany or Netherlands. It can come from anywhere, from France via Germany and then into Poland or from any other country. Once the interconnector is open, Polish market is free to have cheaper energy from anywhere else. What's interesting is if this gap is around 6-7 euros in recent future, but if we just for example, here there's a break from 2021. I just simulated 2030, and it comes to a conclusion of energy target model that the market will converge to one market, and you'll see that the gap is converging. And the reason being that there is a lot of capacity which will retire between 2021 and 2030. There'll be new capacity coming online, and that new capacity would be mostly setting the prices everywhere, or will have the same range of the prices. As we have seen from the previous slide, that going forward, at least from 2030, there will be increasing role of gas power plants setting the prices, which makes us to believe that latest by then we'll have more convergence in prices not only in closely connected countries like Germany and France, but also in a bit further countries like Poland as well. The last basically slide of the presentation are the risk factors, which basically cover the shorter term and the longer term risk factors to our forecast in our energy market report. And we identify the major ones as the nuclear, renewables, and the CO2 going forward. In the shorter term, there are different ones. For example, coal plant availability, we see the biggest risk in the short-term forecast, whether it be upgrades or mothballing or simply closures forever. It's very tough to get the real-time information, so it happened and you know it, and also in what capacities are going offline and being upgraded. There's always a delay between the data, if at all. And also the interconnection between Germany and Poland. There are some irregularities in publication of the data. Beyond that, there is an upgrade coming up, which was supposed to be 2016 online, but we have got recent information that it's been postponed to 2017. So the things may look different once it's up and running as well in shorter term. In longer term, the biggest gamble is the nuclear entry, which Polish government expects to be in the market around 2027. We assume delayed entry around 2030. If it's going to come, if it's not going to come, if it's going to come on time. Earlier, we can hardly expect that, but if it gets delayed, then how the gap will be filled? What will be the short-term solution around that time? Will the older power plants and CO2 emitting power plants get yet another extension? Will they get more money? Which leads us to second risk factor, which is the renewable build. And this is something where Poland is really just under reasonable targets. They're not so aggressive. And if we assume for some other reason that there could be an aggressive solar, wind new build capacity in Poland, that may change scenario a little bit. We, of course, will have more seasonal variation and intraday variation of prices due to intermittency of renewables. But there might be also an internal and external transmission issues arising, for example, locational margin pricing. And of course, it will also lead to more price volatility. And the load factors and the revenues that I showed you for the CCGT plants will also change accordingly. So this is something we have to keep a watch on. The biggest, again, risk factor next to nuclear is the CO2 prices, the EU ETS trading scheme. And here we have assumed a CO2 price forecast, which is more in line with the EU scheme of having relevant CO2 cuts according to 2030 targets, 2040 targets. And should that not happen, should the CO2 prices suddenly collapse, as you have seen in 2007, or briefly also in around 2010 and 11, that would, in other words, mean that more coal will be built. It will be simply too expensive to invest in any other cleaner technologies if the CO2 is that cheap. So in summary, these are the risk factors, and I think that's interesting that it's a good part that we keep updating these reports every 6 months and have a look at these fundamentals if we have new updates, maybe calculate different scenarios, different CO2 price scenarios, just to give an idea to our clients. If the price vary, how are the things going to change in terms of new build, in terms of prices, or spark spread forecast going forward. So with that, we have come to an end to this webcast. There is, of course, a lot deeper information about market prices, about spark spreads, about the different scenarios, about local regulations, about renewable built by technologies. All that is a part of our market outlook report. Nevertheless, for the people who are interested in some other countries, just to get a high-level overview that you get today for Poland, we have upcoming webcast for single electricity market Ireland, which is to be on 24th of November, a Tuesday. Followed by that is Great Britain market, CB market on 2nd December, and the last one about German and French energy markets. You can either follow the hyperlinks if you request us these slides, or you can also register directly by visiting us on energymarketintel.com and then choosing webcasts. In case you wish to contact us for any sales inquiries, we have emails and phone numbers. We respond very promptly. Please don't feel shy, or any questions related to this webcast you want to discuss later can be sent to these email addresses. With that, I'll thank you for the listeners, and with a half-minute pause, I'll be ready to take any questions if they are on the chat. In the meanwhile, if you can think of any questions that you want to put, you're most welcome. We'll try with our best capacity to answer that in this session. Otherwise, we'll follow up with you. Thank you.
And at this time, Ankur, I have seen no additional questions.